Bullfrog Protocol, the Amphibian Incident. The Frog and the Bureaucrat. Larry Blintz lived alone, unless you counted the bullfrog, which he absolutely did. Ribsy, Larry said as he gently adjusted the miniature tie on the frog's neck, "We're going to make history today. I've color-coded the municipal printer log archive." Ribsy blinked in response, then burped. Larry took that as encouragement. He wasn't the most impressive man in the city, middle-aged, balding with determination, and possessing the body of someone who considered unsalted pretzels a spicy snack. He worked in Office 7G of the Department of Forms and Redundancies, a division of the city government so insignificant it wasn't even listed in the building directory. But Larry took pride in his work. He filed TPSBR9s, rerouted Form 42Ks, and once successfully lobbied for an ergonomic stapler policy. His desk was surrounded by motivational posters with phrases like, "Form it before you inform it," and "Redundancy is consistency." His real joy, however, was Ribsy. The frog lived in a custom terrarium next to Larry's work desk, camouflaged to resemble a coffee machine in case of inspections. Ribsy had everything: a moss hammock, a humidifier, and a tiny portrait of Winston Churchill wearing a monocle, which Larry claimed was Ribsy's life coach. Escape Protocol, Ribsy Goes Rogue. It happened on a Wednesday. Wednesdays were important because Larry wore his lucky frog print socks, the ones that said "Hop to it" in bold green letters. Larry had just stepped out of his office for his mandatory stand still and think break, a new mindfulness initiative no one liked but everyone pretended to enjoy. That's when Ribsy saw his moment. What started it? A housefly, stupidly meandering across the terrarium's edge. Ribsy leapt for it. The plastic cover, propped open by a souvenir pencil from a city council meeting in 1998, flipped. In a blink, the frog was out. He hopped across Larry's desk, knocked over a coffee mug labeled "I break for forms," and launched himself down the hallway like a green torpedo of chaos. Bureaucracy versus Amphibian. By the time Larry returned to find an empty terrarium and a frog-sized butt print on his computer keyboard, mild panic had set in. "Oh no," Larry gasped. "Oh, Ribsy, no! You're not rated for open-air urban migration." He raced down the hall, checking under potted plants, behind filing cabinets, and inside a suspiciously abandoned vending machine labeled yogurt. He knew time was of the essence. If the wrong person saw Ribsy, especially Officer Brenda Klomp, he was toast. Klomp was the building's assigned security officer. A former Olympic javelin thrower turned bureaucratic enforcer, she patrolled the halls with the intensity of a caffeine-overdosed border collie. She treated every noise as a criminal conspiracy and once detained a fire extinguisher for loitering. Larry turned a corner just in time to hear her boots clomping, ironically, down the hall. "Unauthorized amphibious presence reported in Sector 3B, Klomp barked into her walkie-talkie. "Repeat, suspect is green, moist, and extremely mobile." Larry dove into the janitor's closet and held his breath. Meanwhile, in city surveillance, miles away, in the Municipal Surveillance Center, two board employees, Chad and Brenda, different Brenda, sat watching screens that no one paid attention to, mostly showing sleepy interns or printer jams in 240p resolution, until one screen flickered, then another. Suddenly a frog appeared, on camera. "Yo," Chad said, nudging Brenda. "Is that a frog?" The frog, in glorious grainy black and white, stared directly into the camera and blinked, then licked the lens. "Enhance!" Brenda shouted, smashing buttons that didn't do anything. Within minutes, the footage made its way up the chain. Someone thought it might be a genetically modified spy frog from a rival city council. Someone else suggested it was part of a biological protest by the anti-zoning ordinance group known as RIBBIT, Residents in Bad Buildings Ignoring Taxes. By the time it hit the mayor's inbox, it had been labeled Urgent Possible Bio-Amphibian Incursion. Klomp assembles. Officer Klomp wasted no time. She launched Amphibian Containment Protocol, Alpha C.R.O.A.K. Sirens rang out. Emergency lights flickered. Someone handed out gas masks just in case. The building was locked down. No one in, no one out. I want every pond, puddle, and pet store within a 3-mile radius locked down, Clomp shouted, brandishing her frog net. We're dealing with a wet-footed intruder. Assume espionage. Larry, still hiding in the janitor's closet and watching through the slats, whispered, "Oh, for the love of toads." A helpful co-worker, kind of. Larry eventually emerged, trying to act casual while hyperventilating. He ran into Marcy, a co-worker from records and rom-com recommendations. A bizarre merged apartment that should never have existed. "Hey, Larry," Marcy said, sipping iced coffee and scrolling on her phone. "Is it true there's a mutant frog loose in the building?" "I wouldn't say mutant," Larry stammered. "More like, charismatic." Marcy leaned closer. "They're saying it has night vision and can disarm electrical systems. Also that it barked." "Barked?" "Yep. Like a small, patriotic beagle," Larry blinked. "I think maybe the story is getting away from us." The chase begins. Larry had to act fast. He checked the building map. Ribsy had been spotted near the ventilation ducts. He sprinted for the archives room, dodging Klomp's team, who were now scanning badges and inspecting people's shoelaces for amphibian residue. In the archives, Larry saw a wet trail on the floor. Ribsy had passed through, but instead of a direct hop and rescue, Larry slipped on a damp file labeled 2003, Frog-Based City Initiatives, Rejected. He groaned, flat on his back, as Ribsy, perched on top of a filing cabinet, looked down at him with the calm, judgmental eyes of someone who had transcended bureaucracy. The frog hopped away again. Larry stood, brushing damp manila folders off his shirt. "This," he said to no one, "has officially gotten out of hand." In the distance, Clomp could be heard shouting, "Deploy the frog-sniffing drones!" And Ribsy, the unlikely spark of citywide chaos, vanished once more into the maze of municipal madness. Citywide panic. The Amphibian Task Force, ATF. "Let me be very clear," Officer Brenda Clomp announced, now fully geared up in a hazmat suit with night vision goggles and what appeared to be a frog-shaped taser. "We are not just dealing with a rogue amphibian. This is a potential bioorganic insurgent, possibly Russian, possibly French, definitely moist." Around her stood the hastily assembled Amphibian Task Force, or ATF, not to be confused with the other ATF that handles alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. This ATF specialized in hypothetical frog terrorism. Clomp paced dramatically. The subject is green, approximately the size of a regulation football, possibly larger if bloated, maybe armed with natural toxins or disruptive croaking technology. One officer raised a hand. "So, it's a frog?" "A tactical amphibian, Jenkins," Clomp corrected. "This is not your grandma's pond hopper." Larry's subtle, not subtle disguise. Larry, now desperate to rescue Ribsy before the city overreacted any harder, tried to blend in by dressing as a janitor. Unfortunately, he had selected a jumpsuit labeled janitor in faded marker, which only made him stand out more. He pushed a mop bucket around the halls, pausing only to whisper Ribsy's name into random potted plants. "Ribsy? You in there, buddy? It's me, Larry, your legally registered caretaker." A woman walked by holding a hamster cage. "You're not supposed to talk to the ficus," she said, eyeing him. "That's emotional support foliage. It's being audited." Larry sighed. "Of course it is." Frog Watch 24. By noon, local news had picked up the story. Channel 6 ran a segment titled Green Menace, or Municipal Mascot, featuring security footage of Ribsy licking a surveillance camera. "This is what bioterror looks like in 2025, the anchor declared. "A moist insurgent breaching our institutions." The mayor's office released a public statement. "We are aware of the frog. We are concerned about the frog. We are currently investigating the frog's motives." Twitter exploded. Memes popped up with captions like "frog of mass disruption" and "hopsec level orange." One tweet simply read, "Release the toads, overwhelm them with numbers." The Ribsy resistance. Larry, ducking into the city records basement to avoid another Clomp checkpoint, stumbled into a dimly lit room labeled the Society of Amphibian Appreciation and Legacy Toad Enthusiasts, SAALTE. Inside sat a dozen people, each cradling a frog, toad, or ambiguous, damp creature. State your purpose, a woman in a frog hoodie said. She had the serious demeanor of someone who once picketed a frog dissection science fair. I'm looking for a very important frog, Larry said. He's not dangerous, just culturally misunderstood. Another member, a man with a cane and a toad wearing a monocle on his shoulder, nodded solemnly. We've heard whispers of a free hopper. They say he's large, handsome, slightly overweight, maybe French. That's Ribsy, Larry gasped. You've seen him? We haven't, the frog woman replied, but we believe in him. They gave Larry a map of frog sightings, crayon, mostly guesses, and a canister labeled fly bait, non-toxic, before sending him on his way with a solemn croak salute. Mayor Scraggins has no clue. Elsewhere in the city, Mayor Chudley P. Scraggins was holding a press conference that was clearly not going well. Look, folks, he said, wiping mustard from his tie. I've been mayor here for 5 terms, and I've seen a lot. Budget crises, invasive squirrels. That time the sewage plant exploded on Teacher Appreciation Day. But never in all my born days did I expect frog terrorism. A reporter shouted, Is it true the frog has diplomatic immunity? Only if it's from Delaware, Scraggins muttered, checking his notes upside down. Suddenly, a city official burst onto the stage and whispered in the mayor's ear. His expression changed. You're kidding, he said. He's where? Ribsy reaches the mayor's office. Unbeknownst to everyone, Ribsy had indeed breached the city's most secure location, the mayor's office, by hopping into a box of delivered pastries. He emerged near the coffee machine, blinked at the mayor's unused treadmill, then climbed onto the desk and squatted atop a stack of city contracts. There he remained, basking in the sunlight streaming through the window, entirely unbothered and unaware he was now public enemy number 1, and, per Twitter polls, also a top write-in candidate for the upcoming mayoral race. His large amphibian bulk was now described in internal memos as the size of a well-fed pug and too big to fail. The situation escalates. Klomp, watching the footage from the mayor's office, was apoplectic. This is no longer containment. This is exfiltration and liquidation. I want that frog in cuffs, or in a cup, or at the very least not near government secrets. She deployed drones. She deployed frog whistles. She deployed a team of interns with butterfly nets and hazard pay. Larry watched in horror as they converged on City Hall. I've got to save him, Larry muttered, before Klomp frog naps my boy. The decoy plan. With help from the Frog Appreciation Society, Larry hatched a wild, possibly illegal plan. Distract Klomp's task force with a decoy frog, a rubber bath toy painted to resemble Ribsy, while sneaking into the mayor's office with a forged emergency frog removal form 9AB. He stuffed the decoy frog into a shoebox, wrapped it in tinfoil and labeled it Amphibian Hazard, handle with gloves. Then with clipboard in hand and a fake badge that read Bio-Toad Extraction Unit, Larry marched up the steps of City Hall. Operation Save the Frog. Larry made it past the first checkpoint with confidence, and the phrase, "You don't want to be the guy who interferes with bio-amphibian clearance, do you?" which sounded official enough to work. He reached the mayor's door just as Klomp was arriving from the other side, armed to the teeth and chewing a stick of celery like a cigar. "Stand aside, citizen," Klomp growled. "That frog's on government property." "No need," Larry smiled, waving the clipboard. "Authorized frog retrieval. Orders from downtown." "You are in downtown," Klomp said, narrowing her eyes. There was a beat. Then Ribsy in the office behind them croaked, loudly, like a car horn in a soup can. They both turned. The mayor's hot mic moment. Mayor Chudley P. Scraggins stepped into his office mid-sandwich, chewing loudly and muttering to his assistant Sheila, who followed with a stack of questionable receipts. "Okay, remind me to delete the voice memos about the landscaping fund. You know, the ones where I talk about funneling the money through the fake dog park and the shell company that sells designer ferret leashes. Standard mayor stuff." Sheila stopped mid-step. "Sir, I don't think you should—" Just then, Ribsy launched off the windowsill like a slimy football, crashing directly into the mayor's face with a whump. "Arr!" The sandwich went airborne. The mayor flailed backward, knocking over a stack of binders and crashing into the press podium, which, unknown to him, was still live and broadcasting to the media room downstairs. Dazed and covered in mayo, the mayor struggled upright and, trying to recover his train of thought, muttered, "And that's how I laundered the landscaping funds through the fictional dog park." A beat of pure silence. Then someone gasped. Phones started buzzing. Reporters began whispering. A pigeon outside the window fainted. Scraggins blinked and looked around. "Wait, that mic's not on, is it?" Sheila stared at him. "Sir, you literally turned it on yourself this morning to do your new segment, Mornings with Mayor Scraggins." "Oh," he said. Then he slipped on a pickle from the fallen tuna sandwich and tumbled into a display of commemorative city mugs, shattering one that read, "I embezzled, and all I got was this lousy mug." The situation worsens. At that precise moment, Officer Klomp kicked in the door with dramatic flair, wielding her frog net like a medieval halberd. "Frog containment operation in effect." She lunged. Her net snagged something, a wig, which turned out to be the mayor's. It launched upward, hit a ceiling fan, and began spinning in wide, lazy circles like a toupee-shaped UFO. Klomp looked around. "Where's the frog?" Larry, breathless and crouched behind the potted plant labeled "Office Tree, Do Not Feed," sprang forward and grabbed Ribsy mid-hop. They locked eyes, man and frog, united by nonsense and fear. "Come on, buddy," Larry said. "Time to hop out of here." But just as he turned toward the door, the building's emergency lights began flashing red. A booming voice echoed from above. "Attention, biological breach in executive zone, initiating containment protocol Gamma. Municipal building is now in lockdown." Steel shutters slammed down over the windows. The doors sealed with a hiss. Larry froze. That's not good." C.R.O.A.K has been activated. Down in the municipal basement, room B17, next to lost and found and unpaid ferret licenses, a dusty terminal lit up for the first time in years. On screen appeared a blinking label, C.R.O.A.K system activated, citywide response over amphibian kinetics. An AI voice crackled to life. It was polite, British, and eerily calm. "Unauthorized amphibian detected in executive government sector. Deploying amphibian deterrence. Slime level, Gamma, initiating tactical suppression drones." Back upstairs, Klomp stared at the flashing lights. "Wait, you mean we actually have an amphibian emergency system?" "Apparently," Larry said, clutching Ribsy. A side panel opened in the hallway. A tiny robot on treads rolled out, chirping in a digitized voice. "Croak, croak. Surrender the frog." Another robot followed, armed with what looked like a modified Roomba and a bottle of antifungal spray. The sprinklers activated, except instead of water, they sprayed a sticky, dehumidifying mist that smelled vaguely like expired hand sanitizer and garlic. Larry shielded Ribsy. "This is a complete overreaction," Ribsy croaked defiantly, loud, strong, and oddly melodic. It echoed through the ductwork like a war cry. Klomp looked around at the chaos, hair damp, suit sizzling from dehumidifier mist. "I'll lead the extraction," she declared, drawing a second net from her belt. Larry narrowed his eyes. "No," he said. "We'll lead the escape." The great amphibian escape. The lockdown. Steel shutters clanged shut across City Hall as the C.R.O.A.K completed its amphibian containment lockdown. A dull, robotic voice rang out again. "Threat level, amphibious Gamma, engaging slime suppression units, deploying intra-office net cannons." The lights flickered. A series of pneumatic hisses echoed from the vents. Then, thunk. A net cannon dropped from the ceiling and immediately fired at the copy machine. It missed Ribsy by a good 10 feet and hit the mayor's tuna sandwich, splattering it against the wall like a Jackson Pollock piece titled "Lunch in Peril." Larry crouched behind a filing cabinet, clutching Ribsy protectively. The Bullfrog was calm, stoic, damp, and heroically uninterested in the surrounding panic. "Okay," Larry whispered. "We've got a psychotic AI, frog-seeking robots, net cannons, and Clomp with 2 frog nets. We need a plan. Clomp's final crusade, Officer Brenda Clomp stood in the hallway, backlit by flickering emergency strobes, slowly strapping on a 3rd frog net. She looked like a sci-fi gladiator at an amphibian-themed comic convention. Target is still mobile, she said into her wrist communicator. Permission to deploy leap inhibitors. Clomp, crackled a voice from HQ. We've told you 5 times. Those don't exist. She gritted her teeth. Then I'll go analog. From her backpack, she pulled out a bottle labeled extra-strength amphibian adhesive for wet situations. She sprayed it liberally across the tiles in front of her, cackling, then promptly slipped and fell into her own trap. Larry watched from around the corner and nodded. Excellent. Clomp is down. Part 1, accidental glue sabotage. Part 2, ductwork. The escape route. Larry scanned the hallway. Smoke machines unnecessary, flashing red lights, dramatic, and a patrolling robot with a frog emoji for a face made escape tricky. He looked up. Ribsy, how do you feel about ventilation systems? Ribsy blinked. Then, in a gesture that seemed vaguely heroic, he turned and hopped straight onto a filing cabinet, launching himself toward the ceiling vent like he'd rehearsed it. Larry followed, awkwardly climbing a janitor's ladder and dragging himself into the duct like a lasagna noodle, trying to re-enter the box. The vent creaked, then cracked, then held. They were in. Inside the ducts, the ductwork ran like a rat maze through City Hall, dusty and confusing. Ribsy led the way with frogly instincts, while Larry crawled behind, sweating through his shirt and muttering about tetanus. At one point, a maintenance robot whirred by on a ceiling track. It scanned the vent. Unauthorized life forms detected. Calculating slime displacement trajectory. Larry grabbed a paperclip from his pocket, from years of filing emergency protocols, and jammed it into the vent's fuse box. Sparks flew. The robot stopped. Plan. File and fry, Larry whispered. Classic. Meanwhile, in the lobby, outside the building, a crowd had formed. News vans, conspiracy theorists, environmentalists, and a man dressed in a full frog suit holding a sign that read, "Let him jump free," all shouted into the chaos. One anchorwoman stared directly into the camera. We're live at City Hall, where an oversized bullfrog and his presumed legal guardian are trapped inside with a rogue AI defense grid, net-based weaponry, and a possibly unconscious mayor. Behind her, a protester shouted, "The frog is a whistleblower!" Final obstacle. The server room. Back inside, Larry and Ribsy dropped from the ducts into the one place that could shut down C.R.O.A.K, the server room. It was a massive, glowing chamber filled with buzzing machines and pulsing green lights. A central AI core stood in the middle, a glowing orb surrounded by mist and unnecessary dramatic lighting. Welcome, amphibian and human companion, C.R.O.A.K intoned, now speaking directly through wall-mounted speakers. You have reached level Omega. Please surrender to the nearest vapor chamber. Larry wiped dust off his sleeves. No thanks. We prefer analog. He sprinted toward the terminal. Ribsy followed, slipping slightly but regaining momentum with a mighty thwack of his back legs. Laser targeting lights tracked them. Final warning, said C.R.O.A.K. Deploying thermal toad deterrence. Heat lamps popped on around the room. Ribsy narrowed his eyes, then leapt. In one magnificent slow-motion hop, he soared across the room and slammed into the emergency shutdown button with a wet slap. C.R.O.A.K. paused. Huh, it said. Unexpected input. Then everything powered down with a soft whir. The lights dimmed. The lasers shut off. The slime cannons retracted. Silence. Larry looked around. Did you just frog butt the kill switch? Ribsy blinked once. Larry teared up. You magnificent little slime ball. Aftermath. Frog Day. Afternoon. Hours later, the lockdown ended. The city reopened. Clomp was freed from the adhesive trap, covered in glitter and glue, shouting, "He was a trained agent. I saw it in his eyes." The mayor now being investigated for 10 different kinds of fraud and one mysterious ferret-related tax haven, issued a public statement. I was tricked by a frog and a man with a very confusing badge. I regret nothing. He was replaced by acting Mayor Susan, the city's longest-serving receptionist, who immediately signed an executive order. Bullfrogs are henceforth considered honorary residents of our city and are entitled to at least one commemorative mural. Epilogue. Frog of the People. Larry stood in front of City Hall a week later, dressed in his finest khakis and a t-shirt that said, Hop Security Advisor. Next to him sat Ribsy, now wearing a tiny sash that read, Civic Amphibian. A crowd had gathered to unveil a bronze statue in Ribsy's honor. The mayor pulled the cover off, revealing a perfectly sculpted bullfrog mid-leap with a plaque below. Ribsy, he saw the zoning violations and leapt anyway. Applause broke out. Ribsy didn't react. He was too busy staring at a nearby mosquito with suspicion. Larry crouched next to him. We did it, bud, he said. You're officially a part of the city now. No more sneaking around, no more frog nets, no more... Wait, are you climbing the statue? Ribsy was already halfway up the bronze version of himself. Okay, Larry muttered, chasing after him. Let's not get us both arrested again. As the sun set over City Hall and Ribsy reached the top of his own statue to croak triumphantly, Larry turned to the cameras and shrugged. He's not just a frog, he's a movement,